Welcome to this explainer. Okay, we're diving straight in today because we're looking at an absolutely incredible feat of biological engineering: blood pressure homeostasis. See, your body is constantly managing this massive, dynamic network of literal plumbing. It's working around the clock to make sure that every single cell gets the oxygen and nutrients it needs to survive, regardless of what you're doing.
Yes, think about this for a second. How does your body know exactly how much pressure to pump to your brain when you jump out of bed in the morning? Gravity is suddenly pulling all your blood straight down to your feet, yet, well, you don't instantly pass out. We solve this massive physical problem every single day without even thinking about it. And that is the magic of homeostasis, the automated maintenance of a stable, steady state of blood pressure.
So here's our roadmap for today's explainer. 1. The basics of blood pressure. 2. Physics of the fluid circuit. 3. The brain's rapid response. 4. The kidneys and RAAS. And finally 5. Other chemical influences. We're going to break down both the mechanical hardware and the biological software of this whole system.
All right, Section 1, the basics of blood pressure and how we actually generate that pressure.
Before we get into the really complex systems, we've got to understand the core mechanics here. Fundamentally, blood pressure is literally just the pressure exerted by your circulating blood pushing against the walls of your arteries. Your heart acts as this powerful muscular pump, right? It generates a pressure gradient that forcefully drives the blood through a vast network of tubular vessels. We typically measure this in phases: systolic pressure during the actual heartbeat, diastolic pressure when the heart is resting, and the pulse pressure, which is just the difference between those two numbers.
Moving right along to Section 2, the physics of the fluid circuit, specifically flow and resistance.
You know, it's fascinating how perfectly our cardiovascular system mirrors a basic electrical circuit. In an electrical circuit, you have Ohm's law, which states that voltage equals current times resistance. Well, in our body's fluid circuit, we use something called Darcy's law. Mean blood pressure equals cardiac output, that's our current, multiplied by total peripheral resistance. The absolutely crucial point here is that physiologically, when our body wants to regulate flow, it generally wants to keep blood pressure constant. So to change where the blood goes, the body has to change the resistance of the vessels themselves.
Now, imagine fluid moving through a pipe. According to Poiseuille's equation, while things like fluid viscosity and the length of the vessel definitely matter, the absolute biggest game changer for determining resistance is the radius of the vessel, literally how wide it is. By just slightly clamping down on a vessel, increasing that resistance, you get almost zero flow. But by opening it up, you get a massive flow. Changes in the radius have an exponential effect on resistance. So how exactly does your body physically change that radius? If you take a close look at the structure of an artery, you'll find a thick layer called the tunica media, and this layer is just packed with smooth muscle cells. This is the biological hardware that gives our blood vessels the physical ability to constrict, which we call vasoconstriction, and to dilate, or vasodilation.
And here's why changing that vessel radius is so incredibly vital. Just look at how blood flow is completely redistributed when you go from resting on the couch to a full-on sprint. At rest, your heart's pumping maybe 5 liters a minute, with plenty of that going to your digestive system and your kidneys. But during exercise, you can pump up to 25 liters a minute, and a staggering 80% of that flow is actively redirected straight to your skeletal muscles. Your body achieves this by selectively clamping down on the vessels leading to your organs and throwing the doors wide open on the vessels leading to your muscles.
Now, a lot of this redirection happens right there on the ground, locally. We call this autoregulation. Tissues actually have the intrinsic capacity to regulate their own blood flow, and they do this primarily based on 2 theories. The myogenic theory says that the smooth muscles are super sensitive to physical stretch, so if pressure spikes, they automatically constrict to protect the delicate tissue downstream. Then there's the metabolic theory. This one says that if pressure drops and flow slows down, metabolic waste builds up in that area, and those waste chemicals directly trigger the smooth muscle to dilate, which rushes in fresh blood. But local control alone isn't enough for the whole body, which is why we need the nervous system.
Which brings us nicely to Section 3, the brain's rapid response and neural mechanisms.
So the autonomic nervous system is heavily involved in achieving control of your blood pressure. And the ultimate control room for this entire operation is the cardiovascular and vasomotor centers, located right in the medulla oblongata of your brainstem. This center is basically your body's cardiovascular DJ. It's constantly sending baseline tonic signals down your spinal cord to control the vascular tone of your blood vessels. It has specific areas entirely dedicated to constricting vessels and completely separate areas dedicated to dilating them. But how does the brain actually know what's going on out there in the body? Well, it gets its intel through sensory neurons called baroreceptors.
Operating on a reflex arc, these sensors are strategically located in the carotid sinus in your neck and the aortic arch right above your heart. They are constantly monitoring your arterial pressure. If your pressure drops, like when you stand up way too quickly, these sensors instantly detect it. They fire an SOS up to the brain, and the vasomotor center fires right back through sympathetic nerves. This immediately increases your heart rate and constricts your blood vessels, snapping your blood pressure right back to normal in a fraction of a second. But what if the pressure absolutely tanks, like dropping below 70 millimeters of mercury, where baroreceptors just aren't as effective? That's when the chemoreceptors step in. Located in similar areas, these sensory neurons don't monitor pressure, they monitor chemicals. If they detect a scary drop in oxygen, a spike in carbon dioxide, or increased acidity, they trigger a massive reflex. This forces a widespread, generalized vasoconstriction across your entire body to aggressively protect the blood flow to your most vital organs. Now, while the nervous system handles these rapid, split-second emergencies, the heavy-duty, long-term management of our fluid circuit relies heavily on our kidneys.
Let's shift gears to Section 4. The kidneys and RAAS.
This is where we meet a real game changer, the Renin-Angiotensin Aldosterone System, or RAAS. Let's walk through this step by step because it's absolutely crucial for sodium homeostasis and blood pressure control. When your blood pressure or blood volume drops or your sodium gets depleted, your kidneys notice. They release an enzyme called renin, kicking off a biochemical cascade. Renin helps create angiotensin I. Next, an enzyme called ACE converts that into angiotensin II. Now, angiotensin II is a very powerful vasoconstrictor on its own, but it also signals the adrenal glands to secrete aldosterone. And aldosterone is the key here. It forces your kidneys to retain sodium. And in the body, where sodium goes, water follows. This boosts your overall blood volume and drives your pressure steadily back up. When you map this systemically, you realize it's a massive, whole-body team effort. The liver is constantly producing angiotensinogen. The kidneys drop in the renin. The lungs provide the ACE enzyme right on their endothelial surface. The adrenal cortex pumps out the aldosterone. Heck, even the pituitary gland chips in with a hormone called ADH for extra water reabsorption. All of these distinct organs are communicating flawlessly to ensure your effective circulating volume is restored. Okay, to completely wrap up the mechanics of blood pressure homeostasis, we have just a few more vital chemical modifiers to look at.
Finally, Section 5. Other chemical influences.
So, alongside the autonomic nervous system and the heavy lifting of the RAAS cascade, we have these fine-tuning dials. Epinephrine and norepinephrine act as hormones that constrict your vessels during stress, your classic fight-or-flight response. ADH, as we just mentioned, helps you retain water. But we also have chemicals that actively relax the system. If your blood volume gets too high, the atria of your very own heart secrete ANP to lower the pressure. Nitric oxide, which is secreted right from the endothelial cells lining the blood vessels, is a powerful trigger for vasodilation, and bradykinin also steps in to relax that smooth muscle.
So, we've journeyed from the raw physical laws of fluid dynamics all the way up to the split-second sensory control of the brainstem and through the systemic multi-organ biochemical cascade of the kidneys. When you consider the sheer complexity of your cardiovascular, nervous, renal, and endocrine systems communicating and acting in perfect unison to keep you alive and functioning every second of the day, well, it leaves you wondering. If our bodies can autonomously engineer this perfect, millisecond by millisecond physical response, what other invisible miracles are keeping you alive right now without you even knowing it? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep marveling at the science inside you.